First of all, I am very glad, very happy to be here. I want to acknowledge and express my gratitude to the organizing committee, Dr. Stefania Maggi and Jean-Pierre Michel, for inviting me to talk about a topic that, well, today is, I'm having the last talk, so I promise I will be brief, and I want, for me, the most important thing, I'm not going to be talking really about vaccines. I want to, maybe some of you have already know what is One Health. I want you to leave this room with an idea what is One Health. As Dr. Parodi mentioned, I am a veterinarian. Few of us, I think we are 3 or 4 maybe in this room. Here, and maybe some of you are thinking, well, what are you doing here? Or when I joined the National Institute of Health, some colleagues, physicians, PhDs were asking me, well, what are you doing here? I mean, is this, and I have, could you give me some idea about my dog has a problem or my cat has a problem? And I have to say, no, yes, I'm a veterinarian, but I have worked in my past life, yes, with large animals, not with small animals. But I have worked with different species, including the ones that you see in this diagram, from zebrafish to chimpanzees and large animals. But I pursue science, I pursue my career to help, of course, humankind. And that's what I was trying to express in this showing here. The different animal species, domestic and laboratory animals, that we use for humankind. For the benefit of humanity. I mentioned that I have had the opportunity to work with different species, and the reason I joined the NIH first and then the National Institute of Aging is because they want me to help develop more animal models of human disease. As you know, the best model of human disease is another human, of course, but that in many studies is impossible to do. So we rely on different animal models. There's no perfect model. It depends what is the question that we can move ahead. So what I'm going to do, like I mentioned before, is try to illustrate you about the concept of One Health. So the concept of One Health, you can see it in, well, the classical idea of the One Health concept, the traditional perspective, is basically what you see in this diagram. And of course, I am a veterinarian, so I am using veterinarians as a model. In the diagram, we see the realms of human health, animal health, and environmental health. And the definition of One Health is the integrative effort of multiple disciplines working together to attain optimal health for people, animals, and environment. Of course, that depends what is the question, what are we trying to study, to explain. Now, for trying to explain or study certain conditions, certain problems, we need different perspectives. Sometimes we might need a veterinarian working with physicians, maybe engineers, maybe vaccinologists, epidemiologists, etc. The important thing is not to believe that we know everything and work together toward a particular problem. That's the main concept of One Health. So I mentioned the traditional perspective, but if I have to say, if you have to leave this room and remember one slide, I would like you to remember this, because this is the main idea. Basically, on your right, you see the One Health approach. Really, we have these different realms of human, animal, and environmental health, but we really want them to be more, in other words, work closer together. Of course, the challenge is how we can make this a reality. Now we talk more about, yes, One Health, but how really can make this succeed? And it's not easy, because sometimes, like I said before, we think that we know everything, and really we are missing opportunities if we don't have certain expertise to study a particular problem. Like I said, you can forget everything what I am saying, but I will be happy that you remember this slide, especially the diagram on the right, and that's basically my message about the One Health. This is another nice diagram that maybe some of you have seen, and is from One Health Sweden. That is another way of course, expressing the concept of One Health. You see different disciplines involved in the, again, depending what is the question that you want to address. You have the environment, the ecology of, for example, if you want to study a particular disease, what is ecology, in other words, identify the reservoir of a particular agent so you can prevent having that particular disease. So you need individuals with different expertise. So this is another good diagram to summarize the concept of One Health. The idea of One Health is not really new. It has over 100 years of, I mean, we know about that. And here, there are different individuals that express their opinion and about the One Health concept. One of the first one is considered, is Rudolf Virchow, a physician, a German physician, who was considered the father of pathology, of comparative pathology, and he was the one that also coined the term zoonosis. And of course, as you know, zoonosis are those diseases are transmitted from animals to men, we have several of those. The idea is that we don't want to lose this original concept. We want to, I don't want to use the word reinvented, but we should not work alone, the different disciplines. We want them to work together. Again, I am using my bias as, of course, of veterinary medicine. If we think about infectious diseases, in this chart, what you see is basically, it resumes what, in general, global outbreaks. This is across the world. For the past, they are from the 1980s up to 2009. This is outbreaks across the world. In this, from the 1980s to 1989, you have about 1,000 outbreaks. In blue, you have zoonosis, mainly zoonosis. In red, you have human-to-human transmission. And you see, this is only to give you an idea how we still have several outbreaks across the world. And many of them are zoonosis. So if we talk about zoonosis, of course, we also need to know reservoirs. We need individuals with different backgrounds that can understand and try to control the particular problem that we might have. This is another chart that shows the transmission between different, from animals to men. Of course, this diagram applies very well to influenza because, as you know, pigs, swine, and avian species, poultry, have there's a continuous flow of certain strains of influenza from humans to animals to humans, and humans also to animals. Here you have, again, this is a number of outbreaks for the past 10 years. In red, you have human-to-human transmission. In blue, you have zoonosis. Some of them, of course, in influenza, I would have because it depends. Some of the influenzas come from from animals. Other ones are human-to-human. The same with tuberculosis. And again, this is only to give you an idea that we still have infectious diseases. We still have a lot of zoonotic agents. In fact, most of the emerging or re-emerging pathogens are coming from animals. About 60–70% of the new emerging diseases are coming from animals. This is only, this map shows some of the recent, I am not summarizing, I'm only giving some examples here of the recent emerging and re-emerging pathogens or diseases. Why we, as an example, I am using, well, everybody have heard about Zika, starting in Brazil and Colombia. Of course, Zika really came originally from Africa, but it has been going on for maybe a couple of years there. And then, now, of course, now we have this explosion that's affecting pregnant women, and especially newborns with malformations. We have ongoing yellow fever in Brazil that is spreading to other parts of the tropical rainforest. We have, everybody knows about Lyme disease. You have it here in Europe. But the problem is that in the US, we have really an ongoing, we can say, an epidemic of Lyme disease. We have about roughly 300 cases, human cases, per year. It's the most common vector-borne disease in the US. Here in Europe, of course, you don't have those rates. It's a problem because still we don't have a vaccine. We know about this coronavirus from the Middle East. Again, it seems like animals can be involved. The camel can maybe a reservoir that is happening in Saudi Arabia and several countries in this part. But again, this is only an example of new pathogens or re-emerging pathogens. And my impression, of course, is that we are going to keep having this. Why? Because there are significant, there's global warming, there's changes in ecological changes, human activity. You have a lot of migrants coming from Africa, etc. This is going to, we're going to continue to have that. And yes, we might be able to have vaccines for many of these pathogens, but it's something that we have to be aware of all these conditions, something that we have to plan. And already, of course, you know that you have plans for some potential outbreaks. But still, we have now to work with different disciplines. Another area that veterinarians have been working actively is the issue of antimicrobial resistance. As you know, we in the US, we just started to follow the European example of banning antibiotics in animal foods. You did this about 10, 15 years ago because, of course, the issue of antimicrobial resistance, even though that really antimicrobial resistance is more coming from hospitals more than farms, but still it's coming from there. So the US was a little reluctant, political pressure. We didn't want, we were still feeding antibiotics to animals. But now, as you may know, that is changing. Now, in the next, well, it's already started, we are not going to be feeding more antibiotics for growth promotion to animals. And that's happening in the next few years. So this is an area that physicians have been working with veterinarians, with surveillance, and of course, measuring all these levels of resistance. I would like to use an example to show a little bit more about this interaction between different specialties, veterinarians, physicians, using the example of the H1N1 pandemic in 2009. I'm not going to go in details here. We have many experts of influenza here. What I would like to mention here in this example is, and I am emphasizing here swine flu, and I will tell you, I will come back that, because at the beginning of this epidemic in 2009, it was the press and everybody was calling it swine flu, and that brought many issues, many problems to this epidemic. To summarize, well, of course, the pandemic, it was the first pandemic of the 21st century. Really, at the beginning, everybody was blaming the pigs, swine. What we really know now is that it was really a combination of, it was influenza A viruses, a combination of avian, swine, and humans. So it wasn't only the swine. Everybody was blaming the swine. It started in Mexico and the US at the beginning of 2009, and of course, we started to see cases of human-to-human transmission. Fortunately, Mexico and the US have an excellent, I will say, sometimes well, I didn't say a disclaimer. I am giving my opinions here, of course. No, I work at NIH, but I'm giving my opinions here. Fortunately, I was saying that the US and Mexico, they have the Center for Disease Control in the US have excellent relationships with the health authorities in Mexico, the Department of Agriculture have very good programs with Mexico. And again, this is to control many potential diseases outbreaks. So they move fast, they move quickly to try to control this outbreak that was happening in Mexico and the US. Of course, you see it, excuse me. Well, this is a huge border. There's a lot of history here. The history of the U.S. and the Mexico now is interdependent. They sometimes have been a love-hate relationship. But fortunately for the health programs, all the eradications have been working very well. On the right, you see what happened a few months after the outbreak was declared. It was April 2009. Of course, it spread to other countries. But the good thing is that the US and Mexico moved quickly and really at the end of 2009, the outbreak was basically was controlled. This was an excellent example of physicians working well with veterinarians and other epidemiologists, etc. People that were educating different communities in Mexico and the US. But still, you see it here, the swine, the H1N1 swine flu. You know? They took care quickly of the problem. There were efforts at the federal level, and also at each state in the United States have the programs. The problem was that still they were calling swine flu. And what was the problem with that? When people hear, and I'm going to come here why it's important to have expertise from different areas, the press still was calling swine flu, swine flu. So people in the States, in Mexico, and the other countries were thinking, oh, this is coming from the pigs, so I'm not going to eat pork. So immediately, many countries stopped. The US exports tons of, millions of tons of pork to other countries, China, Asia. They immediately stopped that because people were assuming, oh no, we're going to have influenza from pork. So that created a tremendous amount of problem because the press was still calling swine flu, like you see it here. You know. Even later, with several efforts to try to make the press not label this epidemic swine flu, still there was the damage was already done. So I mentioned that people in Mexico and U.S. and across the world avoiding imports from the U.S. About 17 countries stopped importing pork from the U.S. and Mexico. The losses were estimated at about 1,300 million between April 24 and December 2009. And also, this is, I purposely put that, maybe some of you know this. And I said, I am expressing my opinions. The level of stupidity that sometimes could happen when there's ignorance, when there's no people that doesn't have the scientific background, is like what Egypt, the Egyptians did with the population of pigs. As you know, of course, Egypt is a predominantly Muslim country, but they have a 10% of Christians. Those Christians will eat pork. The population of swine is about 300,000, but that doesn't matter. They decided we are going to get rid of the 300,000, and they basically killed the 300,000 for nothing, because it was a loss for them with all the problems, with all that. They went ahead because of ignorance. But again, this is an example of not relying. This is a political measure, but it's again an example of not having the individuals with the adequate training, with the knowledge to say, no, we should not be doing this. This is, that's, again, I'm emphasizing we have to have the expertise at the proper level. This is a cartoon that shows, again, the press in 2000, this is in 2009. And of course, it's showing, everybody knows the story of Noah's Ark and the flood. And in this year, there was, of course, there was an big economic crisis in the US, 2008, 2009. We have all these, And then, of course, still they were calling it swine flu. No? But you can see is what is the cartoon, what it's saying is Noah is having all these problems, and on top of that has a swine flu on the ark. No? So but again, it was a problem that the media was calling this swine flu. So that created a tremendous problem, and only after the Secretary of Agriculture talked with the press later in July, August, they stopped calling it swine flu. But already, like as mentioned before, the damage was done. What is, fortunately, when the countries, the Canada, the US, and Mexico, they have strengths, the programs, they learn tremendously about this outbreak. In general, they did a very good job, even with all the mistakes. So they have a very active programs at different levels. I mentioned the Center for Disease Control, the Department of Agriculture, veterinarians, working in surveillance, working with all the avian or potential avian origin or swine origin strains of influenza. So this was a lesson that show, this was, I would say, a lesson that strengthened the countries, the programs in the countries, because they were using the One Health concept. Now, having these different disciplines working together. In summary, what I wanted to emphasize is that there are different, the world is small now. We are, it's very easy to catch a plane, being other part of the country. We have to develop, to have programs. There are already developed programs, but we have to think always outside the box. We have to know how to have the proper individuals, the individuals with the adequate training background to solve all these potential problems that we might have in the near future. And with that, I promised I was going to be brief. Remember the slide I showed you about the One Health, and with that I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moro. Any question? Yes, please. Microphone.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moro. That was really nice. If I put together the slide you asked us to remember, plus this one, I am reminded of one yearly event that combines human medicine, veterinary medicine, and plant medicine. This happens in Vienna in the spring once a year, and it's from the International Society of Infectious Diseases. It's called IMED, and it's a fantastic venue. And I noticed that there you probably need to add scientific societies.
Correct, yes. Thank you for the yes. I agree with you 100%. Yes.
Another question?
Yes, you showed us a very interesting aspects of collaboration within the US and through the Americas. Do you think it works better in jurisdictions like the US, where animal and pharmaceuticals are all under the same regulatory authority, or because in Europe we have separate authorities for animal health and human health and food stuff, and so we have to coordinate, for example, with the food authority for the treatment of animals with antibiotics, for example. So do you think it works better in where the jurisdiction is joint, or is a matter of just finding the dialogue and where to find the correct expertise?
I think it's a to make it. I think it's a combination of that. The good thing is that because the U.S. have a history of having these outbreaks, the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, works which does basically surveillance of diseases, zoonotic and humans. They do an excellent program doing surveillance, and they coordinate very well with the Department of Agriculture because they have these exercises. So and of course, it facilitated because it's one country, and I mean, they have already done the exercises, all that.
Yeah, please.
Did you measure the impact of antibiotics in animals for the antibiotic resistant in human? What is the impact of antibiotics given to animals on the antibiotic resistance that we have in humans?
Well, remember that we just started to we're in the process. They still have 1 year to go, so we have not. Measure for example, if there is a resistant population of E. coli or to certain antibiotics, because still there is going gradually. The farmers are stopping feeding antibiotics to the animals. So we have had some studies that shows that the antimicrobial resistance drops, but still we are in the early stages. For measuring that, we don't have the experience that you have after 10 years or 15 years.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I know. I think that we have two challenges. The first one is to do not allow antibiotics in the animal food. In Europe, we have absolutely forbidden the use of antibiotic in the animal food since 2010. That is an important progress. We have also a lot of plan. For instance, in France, we have the plan Eco-Antibio. This plan was designed from 2012 up to 2016. And the goal of the plan is to reduce the consumption of antibiotics by veterinarians, both for farm animals and pets, domestic animals, of 25%. And nowadays, in 2017, the goal is more or less achieved because the reduction is 20%, using, for instance, drugs, non-infectious drugs other than antibiotics, using also the practice of antibiograms, to be sure that such a bacteria would be sensitive or not to this antibiotic. So I think it is successful, and in most parts of the world, nation states, in Europe too, they have now planned to reduce. The consumption of antibiotic all over the world is 60,000 tons of antibiotics. The half for animals, half for human. That means that certainly we have connection, very strict connection between. But nowadays, the veterinary profession is really making effort, strengthening the use without any discipline of antibiotic in animals, and prohibiting totally the use of antibiotic for normal animals in the food.
One quick comment that is about the antibiotics is that, as you probably know, I don't know how it's here in Europe, but in the US now the term organic is proliferating, and many still is a minority, but there are more and more farms, chickens that produce eggs, swine operations, that they advertise and when they sell the product, say this is coming from a farm where no antibiotics are given to animals. So that's growing significantly. So that's helping also that.
Yeah.
I would like to add what we were talking in the intervals. So the initiative of Matt Kaberlein in Seattle, he invited the owner of dogs to a huge national study on the basic idea is that dogs are intelligent mammals. They live close to humans. And so they can represent one of the best model to study aging and age-related diseases. And there is an enormous variety of life span, because there are small dogs that live a lot and big dogs which live much less. So there is the genome has been fully sequenced, of course. So is an unbelievable model to study human aging and age-related diseases. I don't know if there will be a sub-study on vaccination, because this could also be interesting. And I think that we in Europe should do something similar, because it's an extremely interesting project, and the cost is not much, because the owner of dogs like the animals so much that they contribute, they pay for everything, and the math is only putting together the information. So and there are millions of animals. So I think that there is another way to collaborate very strongly between humans and other animals.
And I agree with you. And again, a quick comment. In my position on that, one thing that I'm going to promote is, of course, using dogs, because they have the same, like we were talking yesterday, basically have the same exposure as their owners, so they are excellent. And I mean, it could be an excellent model, again, depending what's
cohabitation.
Yeah. The other animal model that I'm going to promote and push, you are going to see something maybe in the next. Well, we're already using that. Is the use of some marmosets to study some aspects of aging.
Yes.
If I just add something to your question, it's very important, because, nowadays dogs and cats are very useful models for spontaneous diseases, cancer, overweight and obesity, elderly too. And because they're living very, very close to human, to the owner, they have also all long life open. And nowadays in France, we have a very important laboratory in Rennes, Brittany, for studying the genome of various breed of dogs. And they have discovered that some cancer common in dogs and in humans, like melanoma, have the same discrepancies of the genome, the same gene. So certainly, and now FDA in North America, for the first time, has accepted for new drugs in chemotherapy, assay on dogs, healed from and some from phase 3 of the study of the drug is now open on dogs before to be open in humans. Yes, please. Jean-Pierre.
Thank you very much. You didn't mention wild animals, which are carriers of specific diseases, and let's say rabies, and so on. And what about One Health concept and wild animals?
Why? We have, different, of course, different species. We don't know the reservoir still of some pathogens. For example, we don't know the reservoir of Ebola, for example. We think that it would be bats, it could be that. We know Lyme, of course, in Lyme disease, we know this. Many times we were thinking it was the deer. It's not the deer, it's really the wild rodents, Peromyscus mice in North America. So if you know the specific, if you're able to detect which one is the reservoir, you can design a strategy to try to control the disease. If the problem is that if it's in the wild, if you have a reservoir and it's the wild, it's difficult. You can have, well, you can have a vaccine, but it's difficult to, for example, if you want to eradicate the disease. I mean, Lyme disease is basically going to be almost impossible to eradicate, but you can control it. No, with rabies it's a different thing. We know that, of course, we have wild, and we have in Latin America years ago there was urban rabies. So veterinarians have a really active role controlling, eradicating rabies. So now we don't have urban rabies in Latin America anymore. We have, of course, rabies in vampires, but we cannot control that. No. So again, yes, they are depending on the species of the animal species. We know. In certain cases, in many cases, we know which one is a reservoir. In other cases, we have to find which one is. No. I think, is that what you were trying to, your question, or?
I'd like to add that in our country, neighboring Slovenia, we are still vaccinating foxes for rabies.
For rabies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But we are still doing it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.